I'm hearing strange noise actually through your.
Sorry, I
through
just.
my headphones. I don't know what that is. Did you just like drop something in the.
I was just doing some sort of vaguely actor-like, mouth stretching exercises before I started.
Jesus. I mean, and I thought I was the professional podcaster here, but wow,
I'm good to go now.
Okay.
When did you ever think you were a professional podcaster? God. Right. Okay, right, here we go. Ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, welcome everyone to episode 57 of the Tokyo Jazz Joints podcast. It's good to be back. And James, how are you?
I am ready to rock and roll on a Friday night here, Philip. I'm so dedicated that I am delaying a very important TV program that just came in. The latest episode of Isaac Asimov's Foundation arrived today on Apple TV, season 2. But I will save that, Philip, because I am, as I always say, a professional when it comes to podcasting, and this is the priority.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I thought for one moment, when you said it arrived there today, I thought maybe you were still doing the Netflix where it came through the post box.
No,
I wouldn't be surprised.
No. In keeping with the sci-fi theme of Foundation, it's very high tech. It, just comes up and it says a new episode has arrived. So yes,
amazing.
But I will say that for later.
Yeah. Well, look, it's good to be back as always, and I'm excited about this one because the last time we did a kind of a series of episodes like this was our epic journey around Kyushu. Now, this one wasn't quite so epic, and I'm going to try not to mix up these numbers because I know I'm going to keep getting them confused, but this is going to be a 4-parter about a 3-day trip.
So it's 9:39. We're on the Tokyo Osaka Shinkansen. Big day ahead. 9 places, James? How many is it?
8 places today.
8 places today, he says.
Plus some okonomiyaki.
And we've got a big box of ibuprofen. A few Genki drinks. It's going to be a big day. Big day.
Philip's making friends on the train as usual, taking his shoes off.
Yep.
And using a lot of profanity.
In my defense, I have 2 pairs of socks on. And
the only ones you brought on the trip.
I'm using swear words that no one else will understand unless they're born and raised in Belfast. So I think we're good.
Okay, so we're going to split this up into 4 parts because there is a lot to talk about, and we did have a lot of different encounters, and it felt like in those 3 days we packed in a lot of stuff and almost felt like we were in quite different places at times, even though we were basically based in Osaka, and we kind of went out from there to various places in and around the city. So that area, what was that area we stayed in initially when the hotel? I never remember that. Is it not? It wasn't Nambu.
No. We were staying in Umeda, which is one of the big
Umeda,
one of the big train stations. But I mean, Osaka is again, I think a lot of our listeners who have been to Japan will probably know this, but Osaka is massive and sprawling. It's but it's only one part of what we call the Kansai region, Western Japan. If Kanto is Tokyo, Kawasaki, Yokohama, Kansai is Osaka, Kobe, Nara, Kyoto. So it's a completely different vibe. And we did talk about it, but it's more than 3.5 years ago, Philip, if you can believe that. The last time we actually talked about any Kansai jazz spots, except for our little elegy for Bird on the last episode. So, I think it's going to be fun to, as you mentioned, to dive into the joints, but also to hit some of our Kansai impressions. And they were very deep ones, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to kick off, to set the tone, I'm looking at a photo just on my phone there, which was one of the Japan's ubiquitous vending machines that was quite close to where we stayed in the hotel. And I remember a very enthusiastic young woman handing out flyers with a baseball cap on, trying to get people to come and buy stuff from the vending machine. Now, it looks initially quite innocuous, but when you actually zoom in, you realize it's selling only edible insects, which I know would be right up your street, obviously, as a gourmet and self-confessed, adventurous eater. You've actually got crickets there. You've got a mole cricket. Didn't know that was a thing. And a various range, 1,000 yen each for one of those insects. You pop in your money. Oh, there's also, sorry, I missed out the crispy sago worm, which is probably what you would have gone for had you had the opportunity, right?
Well, Philip, on reflection, because at the time, I think, regular listeners can easily imagine my reaction. But I have down in my notes here, and I actually remember, I think, saying to you at the time that the young woman was not Japanese. She was speaking to us in Japanese, but from her accent, she was clearly from China. And it brought back this memory, which I'll just go very quickly in, since this is Tokyo Jazz Joint, so not James's travel time stories. But when I did the food walk tour in Beijing with a guide who's actually from Singapore, who was there, and he did these nighttime walks, and he showed us all of those, famous stalls with the crickets and the grasshoppers and this, that, and the other. And then at the end of it, dropped the big reveal. He was like, you do realize this is only for tourists, right? No Chinese people actually eat this stuff. It's just a challenge to see who's stupid enough to try and eat it. And he was like, boom, mind blown, Oh, wow. So all the idiots that you saw there, trying to make their way through raw grasshopper were just being taken advantage of. So I imagine that this young woman there in Osaka was doing the same thing. She saw us. She pegged us for tourists. And she's like, right, okay, I'm going to get this challenge. And I think she was filming it as well, right? It was some sort of live stream. Or I imagine she would.
It felt like,
YouTube,
yeah,
right?
That's actually, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. I mean, I'm still just reeling from you going on a food walk. I mean, it's like a sort of a chocolate teapot situation, I would say, in terms of like, what a waste of money. I mean, why? How did you even get to that point? But anyway, listen, we're going to start with a place actually, so this was the first time we'd been to Osaka together. So we've talked about Osaka joints, but actually we'd never been there with each other. We'd been separately. And as you said, we mentioned Bird 56, and we did get to go to Bird 56 together this time, and happily so, based on the more recent news. And we'll come to that in one of the later episodes. But we had a rough list of places. We had some definite places. We had a few question marks. But I feel like this one was just a name that we had, and it just so happened to be almost next to the hotel that we stayed in. And it was in one of these kind of very familiar 60s, 70s shopping center type buildings that you get all over Japan, tucked in on the ground floor, quite prominent, quite large as well, and very proudly proclaiming the title Jazz on top, with a very snazzy sort of illustration of one high-heeled shoe next to the next to the sign, right?
Made you wonder if they their English was better than maybe we imagined with that rather suggestive title and
good point. Good point. It also says Act 3 as well. Did you notice that on the sign? So I don't know if this is like a third iteration of a place, or that's just one of these
possible.
Random English.
You mentioned, when we were doing the list, I had way previously I'd had it on one of my Kansai Osaka jazz lists, but when I had looked a little further, it seemed that it was more of a club, and it seemed like they had live music every day. So I kind of said, okay, I dropped that from our list, and as you said, it was just a complete coincidence that it was literally 2 minutes from our hotel on the way back to the station. And so not only did we, of course, just want to go and, poke our head through the window, but they were just, what time was this? This was, I would say it was about 11:45, right? So they were just getting ready.
Well, it's funny you should say that. That's exactly the time. That's exactly the time it was, because I'm looking at the sign right now, and it seems like in the spirit of, hitting certain audiences at certain times of the day, they actually open for lunch at 11:45 and close again at 2:00. So it probably does reopen in the evening, but we happened to be passing or arriving just as it was opening. So we went in. We were the only customers in there at the start, right? I think if we were a few minutes early, actually, if anything.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that alone would be enough to cause some consternation among the staff. But a very, again, the usual grizzled, tall, random foreigners walking in, before they're open. But the young lady was very kind. She sat us down and kind of picked up right away. This was a family joint. It was a daughter. It was the mother. I think it could have been the dad in the kitchen. He poked his head out just once. Looked like he was back there doing the noodles and the curry rice cooking up for lunch. But Philip, what was your first impression of this place? Because to me, when we walked in, it didn't feel at all like a jazz spot, like at all. You know, it felt like you mentioned the 60s type building it was in. It reminded me of just your very average Japanese shokudo, which is, I guess, like the equivalent of like a Japanese neighborhood diner where people just go to eat lunch. But slowly you look around and you start to see some things like, wait a second, is that actually a piano tucked in the corner? And oh, wait, behind that plant, there's like a framed photograph of an Oscar Peterson album. So slowly the jazz bits started coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you could sum it up in 3 words, at least our experience of it. Pensioners, lunch spot, I would say are the 3 words. Yes. I mean, they were setting all the tables. So when we came in, all the tables were set, and they were getting it ready for the lunch service. And it was very much, you know, again, if you've been to Japan and you're familiar with these places, you know, there's couple of 4 or 5 set menu items. You get rice, you get miso soup, you get all the sort of accoutrements with your meal. And it sort of threw them slightly, I think, that we were coming in just for a coffee and a look around, because I think once the other customers started to come in, we were definitely lowering the average age considerably, I would say, once they started to come in.
That's right? That's not unusual. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, based on once I started to look around and look at some of the schedule for some of the gigs that were upcoming, I would imagine that the nighttime audience as well would be in that higher age demographic. A lot of vocalists, a lot of local veteran type vocalists, you know, just the kind of place that probably is not on the broader radar of, like, not going to pop up in the, you know, for example, like Way Out West or some of the other Japanese jazz magazines and
definitely not
websites, you know, that focus on gigs around the region. This is the kind of place that is like really, really local. So local, in fact, that the singer that had just done a birthday gig there the week before, I don't know if you caught that, Philip. You might have been already going around taking pictures or, you know, drinking your coffee while I was chatting, but the birthday gig was actually the owner's other daughter, who is a singer. So she performed there to like celebrate her 30th birthday. So, you know, again, a very sort of local family vibe, but really friendly. I think after they got over the surprise of us, you know, they actually came to talk a little bit. We explained a little bit about what we were doing. And then, Philip, I'm going to leave this to you because you know, you do have that storytelling gene in you. What happened when the mom came back to talk to us after we already had ordered our coffee and had been in the place for about 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had a video clip of this because you could subtitle it up, and it was just, it summed up in so many ways that that experience that you have time and time and time again as a foreigner living in Japan. And it does not matter how many years you live there. It does not matter how many complicated, you know, Meiji era kanji you can read. Every single time something like this happens, you're just reminded of your, you know, place in the bigger picture in Japan. And basically we were chatting, I think just asking a little bit about, the place and the history of the place and how long it had been open and so on. And the old woman who brought us the coffee had come over to chat, and we'd asked her these questions and been having this conversation. And then as she went to tell us something, she just said, without even missing a beat, in Japanese, oh yeah, but you guys don't speak Japanese. And just at that point when she said that, the daughter just kind of emerged over her shoulder, and I will never forget the expression on the daughter's face, because she was so embarrassed and so confused by what her mum had said, and we just caught her jumping in. She immediately jumped in from the background and said, what are you talking about? Like, they're literally speaking Japanese to you right now. And the grandmother, once again, like without missing a beat, the mother just went, Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, of course you are. Yeah, sorry. And then the conversation just carried on. But all I could think about was
so
his daughter's
great.
face.
It was so great, and she also, I mean, we're in Osaka, and they do have a very distinct local dialect, and so her dropping in Osaka Ben, like, Mom, what the hell are you talking about? It was just so funny, and it was the kind of thing that I mean, I think you could just, again, you said it applies to so many people in Japan, but it's also one of those great universal moments that everybody has had with their old mom or grandma or grandfather, where you're just like, are you actually paying attention here, or are you having a senior moment,
You and I are just like a couple of tots running across a
That's gonna be different, but she's gonna probably be like, you ain't gonna Japan on me. She's gonna wanna go, even if she doesn't know thing. Which, yeah, I can totally understand that.
すいません。
ああ、どうもありがとうございます。ここは長いですか？店は。
長いです。
長い。
10長いですね。
毎日ライブも。
毎日。
ああ、夜のライブ。ああ、ありがとうございます。
はい、すいません。ありがとうございます。
日本語はわからないんですよね。いやいや、毎日。
日本語も読めはるよ。
そうやね。そうやね。
大丈夫ですよ。読めます。
You can swan about and you're like, oh, I speak Japanese and I can do this and that and the other. And then I think every so often the legs are just cut completely from under you because you're just reminded that, at the end of the day, someone sees you, they think, oh no, foreigner, can't speak Japanese. What am I going to do? The panic button gets hit, and it doesn't really matter what you're saying or what you're doing. It's just that's the kind of the default still. And it was so comical. I'll never forget the daughter's face. She just like looked so perplexed and sort of shrugged her shoulders and then said what she said. And it was just one of those moments. And I happily managed to capture it on a voice memo as well. So any of the listeners who speak Japanese, I'm sure they'll be able to appreciate that. And I'm pretty sure if you're living in Japan, you've had this experience at least once, if not multiple times. But it was all very lighthearted and just a really nice spot to start the day. But we were kind of like itching to get going, right? So this was an unexpected stop, and it was really good. We could use the coffee after the early morning wake up call, but no, definitely we wanted to to get on the train. And the good thing about Osaka is it is a sprawling city in some ways, but the center is smaller than Tokyo, so we were able to move around pretty quickly and get to our next joint, which was, I think, very unusual, actually, Philip. I don't think we visited a jazz spot in exactly this kind of location. I mean, it was very much downtown between two large office buildings. I'm trying to think if you and I have been to a place like that in Tokyo. And I can't really, it'd be like going into, like, finding a jazz bar on a street in Marunouchi or Otemachi in Tokyo. It sort of reminded me a little bit of, like somewhere, the closest I can think of is Step, that sort of area where there's not a lot going on, and it's not probably, I'm just looking at the pictures here. It like there's a coin laundry, and then there's kind of just what looks like office buildings. And like you say, now obviously Step is a lot bigger, a lot more atmospheric, and I think it's down the stairs as well. This was on street level, but it was essentially an apartment. It reminded me of the kind of apartment that a lot of us lived in when we first moved to Japan, right? Like it was just the most functional, basic, oblong box, door off to the left for a toilet, little bit of a unit kitchen, and that kind of one room Tokyo apartment. Like that's to
Oh,
me what
yeah.
it felt very much like, right?
Yes, and but it's incredible because you know how I love my great signs, right? So he does have this really wonderful sign outside that says Bud House on it, but when you walk in, it is I would say it's in one of the smallest places we've been to. I've got down in the
Yeah.
notes 5 to 6 seats on an L-shaped counter. But
Yeah.
that three of the seats had stuff just piled up on them, so
Yes.
it really could
Yes.
only seat about 4 people. It didn't look like he was like cleaning. You know what I mean? You're cleaning. Sometimes you stack some stuff up. That stuff was there. You know what I mean? Like piled up on the seats. So I don't know how he would get more than 4 people in there. And there were records everywhere. There were records, up on a big cabinet. They were behind you along the wall while you were sitting, so you could really barely move between the counter and the wall behind you. And then he had these gigantic JBL speakers up on the shelf. And Philip, I don't know if you remember this, he was playing the music loud. I mean, like loud. And this was at what time? This was the middle of the day. This is like coffee time. So usually the owners, they might, knock it down just a tad bit. But this dude, I got the feeling when we walked in and the way I saw him just sitting there with his eyes closed smoking, one of those classic jazz Buddha poses, I was like, this guy doesn't give a shit about customers coming in here or not. He's going to be doing this. You know what I mean? He's going to play the music.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to play it as loud as he wants. But once he came to talk to us, he was amazingly friendly. I thought he might be a little standoffish, but he was actually really helpful talking to us about other joints in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Places that were a little more distant. I think you might have shown him the map of some of our itinerary. And he was just a real star. Udatani-san was his name. He's not been there that many years. He opened in 2016, and I didn't get his full backstory, but I got the feeling that he's one of these guys who basically had enough in the working world and decided to just pack it in and open up his tiny little cafe. And so that amazingly found this tiny space. And there was one other, Philip, do you remember like probably the coolest thing that he had in the shop?
Yeah. I think I know what you're going to say. Are you talking about the toaster oven?
I'm not talking about the toaster oven. You're always focused
The
on
microwave on top of the fridge, no?
I did not even notice the microwave on the fridge. No, I'm talking about back by where the records were. He had the Sonny Clark album, Cool Struttin', a very famous Blue Note record, which has a shot of a woman's heels and her skirt walking down the street. But he's got 2 copies, and one is facing the opposite direction. So he has, again, I looked this up online. This is alleged. So anybody out there who's more of a collector than you or I are may know this to be true or not. But apparently that was one of those sort of like flipped photo covers that there were only about 20 or 30 of in the entire world. And he has one of them. So he has both albums up on the shelf facing each other, where she's walking to the left and one where she's walking to the right. I think everybody's going to know that album cover. It's one of the most famous ones in jazz history.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I remember being, because I had never seen that before, and I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. That was all I thought. I was like, that's pretty cool. But when I went back and did the research online, I found a whole Japanese blog, a really long blog article by a Japanese collector about how rare the album is. So I was just thinking, wow, that was definitely the memento I would have wanted to take from Bud House. Just a lovely spot.
I mean, when you say the memento you would have wanted to take, that does suggest slightly that you've been taking mementos all this time. Is this? It's not a confession live on air, is it?
It's not a confession. You forget.
Okay.
We did an entire episode based on mementos that we would want to take if we could take them from some of the places we visited. So no, I've received presents from the owners, but I've never actually stolen anything from a jazz kisa. That would be highly inappropriate given the nature of our project.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, I think for me, he seemed like a real loner, one of those kind of guys. Like he was just happy doing his thing. I also remember very distinctly, he was wearing these white gloves that you often see taxi drivers wearing. I think it wasn't a hygiene thing. I think he had quite dry skin. I think he obviously struggled maybe with something like eczema, and it was kind of his hands maybe were quite painful. So he was wearing these gloves and smoking, like chain smoking. And I think maybe were just dabbling again in the world of tobacco. So it was definitely one of the more intense places on this trip for sure. Because like you say, it was, maybe, I don't know, 8 meters by 3 meters, this room. Like, it was very, very small, and he was definitely not maximizing the space as he could. So you had these 3 or 4 seats at the end. There were a few boxes of records in and around the door. And then at the end, past all the stuff that was piled up on the chairs, there was this full kitchen with the fridge, and then the microwave stacked on top, and then the toaster oven stacked on top of that, like that Musicians of Bremen, where all the animals stand on top of each other. And yeah, he was delighted to chat. He was so helpful. We threw all these names at him in terms of places that we were sort of looking for. We couldn't quite get any information, and probably we had to make some difficult choices in terms of the time that we had. Was it worth going out of our way to try and check a few places? And from that point of view, he was very, very helpful. And another thing that I noticed, actually, I was doing a bit of forensics while I was waiting for you this morning, because you were threatening to be 6 minutes late. And I don't know if you remember, we chatted about the poster at the back as well, just behind the fridge. Now, this is an image which I remember. It's actually a poster of a photograph of Johnny Hodges in Stockholm in a restaurant. And I always remember this poster because when we went to Marshmallow in Yokohama way back when, I photographed it sort of through like the blur of some of these kind of Japanese, the celebratory orchids that you sometimes give for presents and like celebrations and things like that. And there's just this little picture of Johnny Hodges' face poking through there. But he had this poster up. And actually, when you zoom in on the photograph that I took with the camera, it's by a Swedish photographer who I think was fundamentally a stills photographer for movies, called Ove Ahlström. And when you then zoom in on the poster, it's actually signed by Ove Ahlström. So at some point, either he's got this poster from somewhere, I don't know where, maybe in Sweden, or somehow he's had contact with Ove Ahlström, who's signed this poster for him. And what's really interesting is the poster is signed 1988. And when I went online to look up Ove Ahlström's biography, he actually died in December of 1988. So it seems like he signed that photograph that he took of Johnny Hodges back in 1960s in a restaurant in Stockholm for this owner of Bud House, or he's procured it from somewhere. But either way, it's signed by the photographer who took the photograph in the year that he died, which I just thought was one of those things that you maybe don't notice when we're in this kind of blur of going to different places and in and out of different jazz kisa. But I'm so glad that I managed to capture that on the photograph, because, like, again, just one of these amazing little sort of Easter eggs that you find in so many of these places that just have these links to jazz history and jazz memorabilia.
That's brilliant. Yeah, because I remember, the poster, that story. Yeah, I'm glad that you kept that for today, because that's amazing. But it just makes you wonder, like, yeah, did he know the guy? Was he involved in the jazz scene? You would assume the guy had been in Japan at some point doing shows or whatever. Or was it just one of those kind of, signed things that you seem to that just pop up in all of the Kisaten that we visit, and occasionally it's the owner himself or herself that got it directly, but sometimes it was a customer who gave it, or sometimes they just inherited it, But, well, the good thing is Udatani-san at Bud House, despite our initial impression of seeming kind of like a loner, very much online. He's a big Twitter user. So,
amazing.
Obviously he tweets in Japanese, but you can see he tweets a lot of album covers and it gives a lot of interesting commentary on it. So try to check him out on Twitter. And I was really happy because, again, Bud House was a place that I knew nothing about. Only had got the name, and from one of my Kansai jazz contacts, who was just like, "Oh yeah, small joint. I think it's the kind of place you and Philip would like." And it was kind of like, okay, that's enough of a recommendation. We've been doing this long enough, so people tend to know the kind of places we gravitate to, and that certainly was correct. Yeah, I mean, we both really liked it. So, Bud House,
he played a lot of
tricky. Good.
Yeah, well, he played a lot of quite new stuff as well on CD as well, right? Because I've got in here. He played. Is it João Baradas? He played an album.
I have that in the notes too, and I still haven't looked up the album, so I'm gonna have to get the João
Yeah.
Baradas from Brazil, album called Home. That was fantastic, and he did seem to have a lot of contemporary CDs, which is not always something that we see, especially when you walk in and you see like you mentioned, like, you know, the Johnny Hodges or the Sonny Clark. You're like, oh, okay, this is standard jazz kissa inventory here, you know. But he certainly had a pretty substantial collection of more contemporary releases, which that's always something that appeals to me. So, and I guess that also ties into him, you know, on Twitter. He does a lot of contact, I think, with like the gigs that are going around town. So it seems like he is promoting, like, you know, maybe the jazz scene and not just the old jazz kissa scene, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, he doesn't. And I think we asked him, you know, without prying too much, we asked him about, you know, where he lived. I think he doesn't live there, but he did. I've got a note here that he said that he sleeps there when it's busy. So he does seem to have people, a lot of regular customers, I think he said. And there's only 5 seats.
When it's busy with 6 people.
Well, you know what I mean? Like, it's all relative, right? But there was that mysterious staircase, which I was trying not to look up the stairs to be too nosy when I was photographing the Sonny Clark album. But I was like, oh, I wonder what's up there as well. But there was definitely a space up there where he could sleep, because it was essentially like a little small street level apartment. I watch a lot of detective shows, so not to go too, you know, kind of Hercule Poirot at the end, but it's interesting, actually, because another photograph, just looking at some of the ones that I took with the camera, he actually has up an album framed, which was Swedish Snaps by Charlie Parker, and a picture of Stockholm. So I wonder if there is like a Swedish connection. Perhaps he went there, he traveled there. Maybe there's some connection like with Stockholm and Sweden, which would certainly make sense, you know, how he would have met Ove Ahlström or something like. So it may well have been in Sweden. I'm absolutely gutted that we didn't notice it at the time and get a chance to ask him about it, actually, because, you know, again, I'm sure he would have had some incredible story, like we've heard from so many owners, but they're not necessarily always like, you know, coming forward with that information themselves, or certainly not boasting about it and stuff like that, you know.
Well, on my upcoming Kansai trip, I will make all efforts to stop by there and solve this mystery for you, Philip. So I'll make sure.
The other great thing about this place was I bought some records, of course, and that's the first time that that's ever happened in any of the places we've been. Like, I don't remember if I've even ever seen any for sale, but he had some boxes. So while you were chatting and I was sort of snapping photographs, I was also flicking through, always a multitasker, I was flicking through some boxes of records. And I bought like a really nice Wayne Shorter album. I bought the Bill Evans, Bill Evans, Jim Hall Undercurrent album. I bought like 3 or 4 records, and they were only like 1,000 yen. So I was like, this was also long before I had vowed to buy any records, because I didn't want to have to carry them about for 4 days. But
I very strongly remember that. You know, I can only buy about 3 or 4 because I really can't carry anything, and that obviously passed by the second place we went to, which was also selling.
Like, yeah, it's fine. So. It's fine. So that was Bud House, which I feel like it wasn't I mean, it sounds disrespectful to him. It wasn't a bonus in that sense, but I think it wasn't maybe one of the places that we had necessarily had on the radar. It was kind of an exploratory, let's see, you know, we're passing by, let's just check it out. But again, you know, evidence that like it is always worth checking out these places, like on a hunch, because I mean, it was just incredible, right? In its own way, just amazing little spot, some really nice stories, lovely owner. And yeah, I mean, I got to passively smoke about 10 cigarettes as well. So, I mean, you know, what's not to like, right?
The next place was definitely one that was heavily starred on my list for years because
TripAdvisor.
I had been hearing about the Jazz Kissa Dear Lord, I would say for at least 6 or 7 years, maybe. And the name alone was enough to really, intrigue me. Dear Lord is, of course, a great John Coltrane track. And, Philip, we've talked many times that there are certain jazz musicians. Jazz is, beloved by so many people in Japan, but there are a few musicians who sort of transcend that into almost godlike status. Bill Evans is one, Miles is one, Monk, and definitely John Coltrane. And so I was really curious. Again, this was one that I hadn't really seen many pictures of. Several people had told me, "Oh, don't worry, you're going to love it." Because of the name, though, and because of the track name, I was wondering if it was going to be really free jazz heavy. Because "Dear Lord" is, despite the how would you say, pious title, comes from a rather cacophonous album. But the first thing before we even get into the music or the lovely owner is, Philip, what was this building that Dear Lord is in? I mean, again, this is a common thing we're gonna explain in Osaka. One of the big differences, I think, between Osaka and Tokyo jazz joints is what exactly was the building that this was in?
Yeah, this was a weird one because it was essentially a brand new building. There was a lot of development work going on around it. So already you arrive and you're like, it can't be here. And then you're not left in any doubt that it's definitely there, because one of the things that stood out to me was just how many signs there were for this place. So I'm looking at the photographs that I have, and I can count at least 7 different signs. It's like somebody went mad with a label maker one day, because it's on the post box, it's on the building digest, there's an actual sign, there's a sign that goes outside, there's a sign inside the window, then there's a sign when you get up to the 4th floor as well. So there was no elevator in this building, right? And we got there about let me see. I'm just going to check. So when I photographed it, it was 12:28, right? And I think we had it down for 12:30. So we got there just before it opened, and we walked up to the 4th floor, and it was definitely not open, right? The door was closed. And
oh yeah, and you know.
No, sorry, it was 1 o'clock. It was 1 o'clock.
This was the kind of building. It's 4 stories, so Dear Lord is at the top, but it is just so narrow. It's just one.
Yeah,
it's not like one of these Japanese buildings with hallways, which has tons of bars going off in every different direction. This is just a narrow 1 room, basically 4-story building, and we just go all the way to the top. I think it was like a ballet school or tap school, like on the 3rd floor. So we climbed all the way up there. We're on the landing, and no, it's not open yet.
Yeah, because it was meant to open at 1, right? That's so we must have got there a little bit. We were a bit keen. We got there quite early, and we were stood. And I remember saying to you, "There's no way this place is opening now," because, famously in Japan, generally speaking, and particularly this place, it all looked very nice and well signposted, etc. Is like, this place is definitely not opening, like either today or certainly not at 1 o'clock. And then, I mean, you couldn't write it, because about 12:58 or 59, we could hear this puffing noise combined with like shopping bags. And sure enough, at like 12:59, this older woman appeared at the top of the stairs with these shopping bags. And she was like horrified. She was like, "I'm so sorry, I'm not open yet. I'm really, really sorry." And she like opened the door and like ushered us in. And we went in, and this building, like you say, it's essentially like, it's like a rectangular box, right? So when you're sitting in the middle of this floor, which and the apartment or the shop takes up the whole floor, on three of the 4 on 2 of the sides you have just windows all along, right? So you're at the top of this apartment building, and on either side it's just windows, and you can see like out across Osaka a load of other tower blocks, a lot of building, a lot of construction. And then at one end, James, there's just that beautiful there's the beautiful window that had the canvas screen pulled down just to mute the light, and then a really tidy looking speaker set up, and a chair just plonked right in front of those 2 speakers.
Yeah,
right?
it's got about 3 chairs right next to the speakers facing them, then a couple of 2-seaters behind that. I think I was sitting in one by the window. But you're right, this kind of like unbelievable U shape. And Philip, listen, man, we both traveled a lot. Do any other countries construct buildings in this shape? I just don't understand it. It's so narrow. I don't even think it was 12 to 13 feet wide. And I just called up my photo that I took. I remember, the first floor is a is a basashi restaurant, which is horse meat. The second floor is a sort of a rehabilitation therapy place. The third floor is a piano school. It wasn't a tap school. And then the fourth floor, dear Lord. So
Everything you need really in one building.
Well, you never have to go, exactly. But yeah, when you walk in and with that sort of view on each side with the windows, I've never really had that spatial experience before in a Kiseten. Obviously, as we documented, so many of them are cramped, dark. Maybe the windows are heavily curtained if there are any windows. But this was actually very, very bright. So it did give a really different kind of feel. But as you said, she was very apologetic because she, oh, I'm so sorry. It was 2 minutes late. Oh, that's not a problem at all. And okay, let's just get this out of the way, Philip, first. Okay,
pizza toast.
You had to go and order the curry rice. Like you couldn't just order a cup of coffee. You had to go make her whip up a gigantic dish of curry rice for you. The poor lady just got there. She's very frazzled. She's got the two foreign people asking questions, taking pictures, and you got to go ahead and order the curry rice. Like,
yeah, but wait a minute.
Outrageous.
Didn't I think the pizza toast that you ordered took longer though? Wasn't there some issue with the pizza toast? Like she was like, oh, it's going to take a little bit of time to make or something. And I was thinking, yeah, if you just ordered the curry rice, you could have just banged it in the microwave. It was out in 2 minutes. You're the one who caused all the fuss with the pizza toast, all wrapped up in your bloody tin foil. Tin foil that came out in your...
My pizza toast is not ruining the atmosphere of this absolutely stunning jazz kissa with that noxious smell of like day old or probably more old.
It wasn't a day old. It was in some packet. It probably lasts to like 2029.
But while we cut on each other for our food orders, do you remember what happened then when the old guy came in? So the old guy comes in, obviously a regular. He gives her just a very casual greeting. He sits down at one chair, a record comes on, and then he sort of kind of like fidgets and he's like, well, it's not quite right. And he gets up, he goes all the way to the front center speaker.
Oh yeah.
Sits in the recliner, puts his head back and closes his eyes and just zones out for the entire record. I was just watching him thinking like, oh man, that's just great retirement life goals. If you can come up to a place like Dear Lord, and just, oh, hey, how you doing? Grab your coffee and just spend the afternoon there. So an absolute classic jazz kissa customer experience with that guy. So, we sat behind him, and she did play, I think she played one Coltrane album, but I didn't grab the notes. What else she was playing? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember what I did notice though, obviously, is that she was using only CDs. So this is one of these places that will forever reason.
I found it. Well, she did have a turntable there, but I guess maybe when she came in, it was just easier to put on a longer CD. She did play some Coltrane, and then she played. Yes, it was Avishai Cohen, because it was one of his more recent releases. So another place that was playing some contemporary stuff. So because it definitely jumped out to me after the Coltrane. The next record I knew right away. I was like, okay, that's definitely something a lot newer. And as you said, it was a CD. So I think like as she kind of got the shop open and ready, cleaning up, taking the deliveries and whatnot, it's probably easier to put on a long CD. Oh, Philip, God, I completely forgetting everything tonight.
I was going to say, it got even better. It got better.
It wasn't just the hypnotized, zoned out jazz kissa veteran customer who came in while we were in there.
Absolutely not, no.
Who else came in to visit us while we were there?
Well, as if it couldn't get more exciting, in the middle of all this lovely owner flapping about trying to get all these orders, because another couple of customers came in as well, older guys, and in the middle of all this, then the gas man turned up to read the meter, which comically was out on the balcony, which was behind the lovely brown canvas screen, behind the speakers. So in the middle of all this, with this music playing really loudly, she had to then go up, lift up this lift up the screen, open the balcony door, and at one point the gas man was out on the balcony reading the meter as all this was going on, and then he just, very sort of calmly came back in, was like, "Thanks a lot," and headed off again. And normal service resumed. So, it's definitely a first for us in terms of Jazz Kisa experiences, but it was just one of those joints. I mean, I think again, it wasn't somewhere that I necessarily had on my radar. It wasn't what I was expecting. And also, again, she had this big box of records that she said belonged to a really old customer in his late 80s. He'd sold them or he'd given them to the shop to sell. And again, I picked up there's an old Ornette Coleman record. There's an old Kenny Burrell. There's an old Elvin Jones, and she was selling them for 800 yen each, and they were in absolutely immaculate condition as well. So again, the same experience twice in one day, which I'd never had anywhere in Tokyo. But just a nice little bonus to that whole trip, not least well because
she's definitely another Jazz Kisa veteran, because the little bit when I did talk with her, and once I kind of explained who we were and what we were doing, and then she was like, "Oh, I just saw you guys on Twitter. You were at Masako the other night."
That's right.
Okay. And I was like, "Oh, that's right. We're connected, but I didn't know that." Yeah. And she was like, "Oh, I was in Masako just 2 weeks ago because I was visiting my daughter who lives in
That's
Tokyo."
right. Yeah.
And so, we got on the whole thing of places we knew and people we knew in common. And she explained that, when she was a lot younger, she used to live in Kyoto for a while. And so she would wander all of the old Jazz Kisa that were scattered around the Kyoto region. Unfortunately, a lot of those are now closed. But she had said that, once she would have the chance, she wanted to open her own place. And it's funny because, I did make a mistake. I thought Dear Lord was a lot newer, but it's actually opened in 2011. So, it's already 12 years. It's not that new. I was so happy we got the chance to go. I was happy to talk with her and find out we had the connection. And then she did an absolutely wonderfully kind thing and gave us I guess for me, Philip, I don't know if you had these in Ireland in the 1980s, but when I was growing up, the coolest thing you could have in class was a pen that had 4 different colored inks on it, and you just slide down the little slider to use your black or red or blue
I know
or
the
green
ones.
pen. You know those ones? So she gave us, remember we talked about how, the Jazz Kisa in the old days, they didn't used to print business cards all the time. They call meishi in Japanese. They would make matchbooks because pretty much everybody was smoking. So the matchbooks acted as the business card with the phone number and the address. Well, she gave us this 4-color ballpoint pen. It says Jazz Kisa Dear Lord, and it has her mobile phone number on it. So I'm holding that and taking notes with it as we record. And
very nice, very interactive,
wonderful little omiyage from Dear Lord. And so
also but she does also have the business cards too, which again I made sure I got one because actually one of my favorite Coltrane tracks is Dear Lord, but I think Roy Haynes plays on it. It's on that, I have it on the Transition album, and I mean I just absolutely adore the track, so I couldn't resist telling her that. And actually the meishi, the business cards that they have for the shop, have a picture of Coltrane on it, so it's just one of those really nice kind of clean.
I don't think I got him. I didn't get a meishi actually.
Oh dear, I'll swap you for your pen.
I've only got the pen. Yeah. Well, Philip, you don't remember. I was embarrassed too because I mistook the album that it was on. Because I confused Dear Lord with Wise One, the track Wise One, which is on John Coltrane's Crescent. But that's because I had already been to the Wise One Jazz Kisa in Sapporo. So I was getting everything mixed up. I mean, there's a lot more Coltrane tracks available. We could still open a Kisa and name one after. But yeah, how great is that, man? The Wise
It's
One
amazing.
It's in Sapporo, and Dear Lord is in Osaka.
I think it's amazing. And also, I just think for me, it's probably one of the more surprising places we've been. And it's probably partly to do with our prejudices, and you're kind of, almost like you just don't expect. When we were waiting, we weren't expecting that owner, or certainly I wasn't expecting that owner to appear. And then when we got chatting to her, we weren't expecting her to say, "Oh, when I'm up in Tokyo and I visit my daughter, I sneak off to Jazz Kisa," or for her to be like really active on Twitter and that kind of thing, And it just really, it kind of challenges your perceptions of what some of these places are. And obviously, we've talked a lot about how they are, very male spaces, and a lot of customers are very male. And that certainly was borne out in the time that we were there, including the gas man. But, she as an owner is really like, pioneering, right? She's doing her own thing. She's plowing her own furrow and doing it very successfully in like what has to be one of the most unique places I think that we've been, like in all the jazz keys that we've been. It's undoubtedly one of the most unique,
Oh, definitely. I'm looking at another street shot, Philip, and I forgot this as well. Is that next to the narrow 4-story building is a just as narrow private house, but this is on a rather commercial street in a neighborhood in Osaka. It just goes to show you. I mean, Japan is just it's just a whole other ball game when it comes to city planning. And when you look at this external picture, you're going to see. I think there's like 9 or 10 different shops in space that would probably just be one shop allowed in cities in the States. That's for sure. Probably the same in Ireland. But Osaka, again, very, very crowded. There's a real lack of land. And so, yeah, you're going to get these little narrow buildings that you walk up and you've got, each floor has its own particular thing. But yeah, Dear Lord I was so happy that we were able to get there. And I still see a lot of people online actually going to check it out based on our recommendation. I think when we got back from the trip and I started putting up a couple photos on Instagram, just to say, hey, we're at it again. And so, people have been going there because it's not like Bud House or Jazz on Top, which were very central parts of Osaka, like we mentioned, whether office or hotel. Yeah. Dear Lord is, I guess I would call it a slightly new town residential neighborhood of really
you need to be going there, I think. Like, it's not a place that you would generally be passing by, right?
Definitely not. And, rather drab, if we're being honest. But sometimes that's where the new places are. We talked about that on our last episode. Like, for example, Slow Boat here in Tokyo, a neighborhood that you really would just pass by without ever getting off the train. But then somebody tells you, no, you got to go check out this jazz joint there.
So we just came out of Dear Lord in Osaka. Thoughts?
Well, one of the greatest contemporary, recently opened Jazz Kisuten. Absolutely wonderful, lovely owner. She was so welcoming to us. A curious visit from the gas inspector of Osaka City.
More details to follow.
Climbed up the 4 flights to come do an inspection, but thankfully it passed, so it's a safe place to visit.
It's safe to visit.
Highly recommended. One of my favorites of recent times for sure.
Although I'd say if you don't like stairs, there's no elevator, so guard those loins before you head up. But it's definitely worth it, right?
100% worth it. Of course, Philip had to go and order the curry rice. Like he just had to do it. It's almost like a compulsion.
Well, I was trying to counteract you went into full, like, nodding, waving cat mode with your politeness. So, it's like, I need to do something to counteract that.
Well, look, on such a positive and high note, quite literally and metaphorically, I think, we should probably wrap up part 1 there. But I'm so glad to get started on this 3 days in Kansai series, because it was such a variety of places and such a lot of stories to tell. And we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with part 2 of the 4-parter, and I can't wait to get cracking on some of these other stories, because there's a few comedy stories coming up in some of the next few places, right?
Oh yeah. Some comedy, some very deep arguments. Of course. A lot to get into. So I'm definitely excited for that too, Philip. So
all right,
yeah.
Well, look, in the meantime, it's been great to talk to you as always. Thank you all for listening and your ongoing support, your lovely feedback on the project, on the book, on the podcast. Keep listening, keep sharing. If you want to see any of the photos that we're talking about in these episodes, you can get them on the Instagram feed, of course. And if you want to look at photos of other joints and wish that you could go there, tokyojazzjoints.com is the place to go. James, in the meantime, you can get that air conditioner back on. I'll put my cardigan back on.
No! I'm gonna go downstairs. I've got my my sci-fi show waiting for me. So
of
it's
course,
Friday
yes,
night.
I forgot.
The
DVD has arrived. I forgot. Yeah.
Casa de OK Jazz. You didn't know that I was a sci-fi geek, did you?
No, I did not. It's whole new. You're like an onion, really. There's so many levels, so many layers.
I'm
rather.
I'm like Walt Whitman. I contain multitudes, my friend.
Indeed, yes. Right. Listen, talking of multitudes, that's reminding me of your bag. But anyway, listen, we'll talk again in a couple of weeks' time. Until
Can't
then,
wait, man.
take it easy.
All right. Ciao.
See ya.